What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, May 20th, 2015. Wednesday, hump day, middle of the weekday. Starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and the Memorial Day weekend is coming up, and everybody's already getting excited and, you know, getting ready for barbecues and the first official day of summer, except, of course, for the people in Colorado who are dealing with snow and the people in Detroit who are dealing with a frost warning, and Michigan and Wisconsin and the rest of that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There's been an interesting development in the area of human-caused global warming. However, let's see. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And basically, just a reminder, tomorrow in our third hour, Donald Jeffries, the author of the book Hidden History, will be our on-air guest to talk about his book, which is a really concise, well-written overview of all of these myriad cover-ups and deceptions we have been looking at and picking apart for the last 21 years. Speaking of which, of course, one of the great deceptions were the lies about Iraq's nuclear weapons, which I wrote as an article, The Lie of the Century. Now that the millennium has turned, I've had to rename it The Lie of the Last Century. And I'm putting it up there because the current spin coming from all these politicians saying, yeah, maybe it was a mistake to go into Iraq is we didn't know any better. It was a simple mistake. We had bad intelligence. No, they were lying. We caught them at the lies. We documented the lies time after time after time after time after time. Now, I have a question for all of those people in the United States of America whose loved ones were killed or crippled in Iraq, knowing now that the government lied us into that war, knowing now that the government is admitting it was a mistake to go in there. How do you feel about the losses you have suffered to make rich men richer? You should be angry. And I understand that when the military pays out for a death in combat to the family, there's a little agreement in the contract. You will never, ever, ever talk to anybody about any of this. Now, story coming out of Voice of America. U.S. reaffirms support for Iraqi offensive to retake Ramadi. And Obama is out there saying they're going to accelerate the delivery of weapons and training to the Iraqi forces to retake Ramadi. Now, here's a question. The U.S. government is now admitting the 2003 invasion of Iraq was a mistake. Why are we compounding that mistake even further by throwing more weapons into that beleaguered nation, leading to more bloodshed? Two wrongs do not make a right. The current U.S. puppet regime would not be in Baghdad at all, except for that first mistake. And rather than make more mistakes, it is time to let the people of Iraq have their nation back and stop wasting any more time and money on this disaster. Now, again, looking at this morning's statements about sending more arms and training to Iraq, yesterday the corporate media was just uncorking all over the place with this idea that we had to go back in. Obama needed to show leadership. We needed to actually go in and intervene in Iraq. And today they're talking about weapons and training, from which I would deduce that the overnight internal polls that were run last night were an absolute disaster. Americans are sick and tired of war. They do not want to send their kids into Iraq for a third time, Yemen for a second time, Libya for a second time, Syria even for the first time, let alone Iran, let alone Russia and China. And so now they're basically out there just throwing more weapons and money at the problem in the hope that it will go away. Now, as it turns out, the Iraqi troops and the U.S. forces deserting Ramadi abandoned their U.S. weapons, including tanks and heavy artillery, which are now under the control of the people of Iraq, which our government calls ISIS, so you don't think about maybe they have a legitimate reason for wanting to kick the U.S. puppet regime out. But if you think about it, right now we've reached a situation where you, the American taxpayer, are paying for the weapons and ammunition on both sides of this fight. That's a little messed up. We're going to grab a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, Mike, this is just sad. It's not even laughable. This is what our country has become because of our government. Empire of chaos.
Yes.
It's sad. All we do is export weapons and death. That's what we do.
Well, as George Carlin used to say, it's because we're good at it.
It's sad. I mean, Mike, I want to talk about Memorial Day, to my fellow Americans, most people when they're around the barbecue, they just talk about either going shopping or sports. And
I don't think they talk about shopping much more these days. They'll talk about sports, but nobody's talking about shopping because they haven't been able to buy anything new and cool for a couple of months now.
But they don't talk about what the meaning of it is. They've been so dumbed down in school and just what's on TV with the Kardashians and reality. They just don't know what the meaning of anything is anymore, Mike. It's a sad state of affairs.
That's the design objective of all the propaganda. And obviously this weekend the corporate media is cranking up all the war movies about how we won World War II and World War I, how the Nazis were bad and we're great and heroic. And they're lining up nonstop celebration of war. And it's always the movies that make war look like a good thing. Movies that are anti-war statements like Full Metal Jacket and Platoon, I have a feeling they may not make the rotation. I haven't checked the guide yet, but
well, if it wasn't for the Russians,
Deer Hunter,
they lost 28 million people. People need to realize that. If it wasn't for the Russians, we would have been fighting on the Wehrmacht and the SS. The majority of them.
Yeah, the United States didn't get into World War II until Germany was already, starting to lose it. And the U.S. tried to take credit for it. Yes, we were the ones who won World War II, just like Obama trying to take credit for whoever was killed at Abbottabad, trying to take credit for this ISIS commander who was killed in Syria over the last weekend. Obama, he really is narcissistic. He wants everybody to think good things of him. And it's led him to some very, very poor decision-making, like Benghazi.
Well, like you said, we play both sides. We arm both sides. Just like, who created Hitler?
That's exactly right.
Who armed him? And then we go around and we say, oh, he's a bad guy. Then why'd you arm him in the first place? He didn't just turn around to be... we funded a lot of, Ford.
Well, when you say we, you should say the bankers.
Like,
No. The government didn't fund Adolf Hitler. Brown Brothers Harriman did. The money junkies funded him because they love wars. They make more money and more debt off of war than any other human endeavor.
Prescott Bush, everybody loves the Bushes, America's other first family next to the Clintons, and nobody even knows the history of the Bushes or the Clintons. The garbage.
Okay.
I'm just so aggravated, Mike. It's like, people need to just do some research,
Yes, they do.
Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. All right, we're going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break here, and when we come back from this commercial break, we're seeing a lot of spin going on about this whole Iraq war, where there's one camp that says, yeah, it's time we acknowledge this was a mistake. There were no weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was not aiding Al-Qaeda. And he didn't have, had nothing to do with 9/11. And the other camp is saying, oh, no. The Iraq war was good and just for these other reasons. And they're trying to shift the story and rewrite history here. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm not kidding you. I was just looking at the corporate news feed. Obama is up there making a speech about how climate change is a serious threat to our national security. Summer officially begins this weekend, and he's already out there. He's going to push for his carbon tax, as I told you he was going to do. As soon as he's convinced we've all forgotten about all that snow and ice from last winter, Oh, wow, it's hot. Yeah, it's human. It's all your fault. You humans are ruining the earth, and we have to take your money away from you to make things all better. All righty, we're going to grab another phone call here. Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Doing great.
You're just doing a great job. Hey, listen, I want to ask you, talk about Iraq, but before that, I want to let you know that I have sued, and a lot of this is because of you. You're inspiration. I've sued the city where I live right now, and I'd like to let you know that. And
you have sued them for?
Well, raising the sidewalks.
Oh,
right?
You and Sharpton's daughter, right?
Yes, my butt has been dragging.
Oh, well, listen, I got to tell you, don't forget to send me a selfie when you climb that mountain down in Bali, okay?
That's the first thing I thought of when you mentioned the Sharpton's daughter. You got to give them credit for comedy, right?
Well, unfortunately, we're not laughing, but it's a window into the psychology of people who seek these positions of wealth and power. They're not sane. They're mentally ill. We just don't recognize it yet. That greed beyond a comfortable life is a sickness, and it's very destructive of society.
Well, you're on the front lines here every day, and listen, I know you're doing your show and whatever, and I don't know how you do it. I'm not a religious, I'm just like you, I'm non-religious, but there is a God, whoever he is, he's behind you, brother, because you're doing the right thing. And I want to tell you, is really why I called. There's two things, I don't want to keep you on, hog up the phone lines here, but your analysis of the Benghazi situation with Clinton and everything, who knows exactly what happened, but that is the most thoughtful. You're like Columbo on that damn thing. You really nailed it. It just fits pieces of the puzzle, mm-hmm. And I compliment you for that. That's brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, is there anything else?
Yeah, I think this Ramadi situation in Baghdad is all those poor, literally poor Americans that they dig up and put in the military, good people, but, need a job, the Marines and whatever, that died for Ramadi, lost legs, lost limbs. What? And I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I think the biggest thing, awakening, maybe not as much as 9/11, is when they take over Baghdad. And here's my thinking. Instead of taking over Baghdad, when the so-called ISIS, the American-backed, phonies, take over Baghdad, let's just call it truce, and let's get Brian Williams and Baghdad Bob to duel it out.
Oh, I'd pay money to see that. But listen, you need to...
And whoever wins, we can save a lot of lives.
Yes.
Just get two liars up there and, and see who wins.
Do you remember when Saddam Hussein actually challenged President Bush to a duel with scimitars? Said, look, just let meet in an arena. We'll have it out amongst ourselves, and the one who's still alive at the end has basically won the war. But before I let you go, I want to point out that the government and the media are flinging the name ISIS around as a cover for the fact that what you're really seeing in Ramadi and across Iraq are the people of Iraq trying to kick out their U.S. puppet ruler. And our government can't admit that's what's really going on. So they created this uber villain, ISIS. And anybody who's standing up to American imperialism, it's ISIS. They behead people, they burn people, they're terrible. Don't even think about them. Just do the 2-minute hate and scream about how you hate ISIS and fling your babies onto the bayonets. That's basically what the propaganda is. ISIS, is basically, maybe 100 guys in a video production unit to create this legend of ISIS that is used to tarnish anybody the U.S. wants to declare war on, whether it's Syria or Yemen or Libya or Iran, or have a convenient villain for a new false flag attack here in the United States of America, which could even happen this weekend.
Michael, I totally agree with you. Who knows? 100%, but I think you're totally right on. I'm just asking you, in the seriousness, of the world situation, nuclear war, if they take Baghdad, that is a defining thing, because that is the Iraq War, it's Baghdad.
That's exactly right.
That's Baghdad, Bob.
That's exactly right. They'll take Baghdad and...
What will happen? What do you think will happen when Baghdad falls to the so-called ISIS, production unit?
Well, I think that's one of the things putting pressure on the U.S. government. There's a couple of other things that are happening where this Memorial Day weekend is basically the last chance they have for a spectacular false flag attack to try and revive the war agenda. And we need to be very cautious about what we're seeing on the news over the Memorial Day weekend, because they're looking, Greece has now announced when they're going to go into default. They're getting, the U.S. is getting kicked out of Iraq. The U.S. is not doing very well over in Libya. They're not doing well in Yemen. And they're dealing with a population that is sick and tired of paying for war, bleeding for war, that seems to go on forever. The U.S. government cannot win this war without somehow reviving popular support to just go on out and kill those brown people. And I'm smelling panic and desperation coming out of inside the Beltway.
Yeah, Michael, one last thing I said. I want to hog the lines, but Dustin, New Jersey, he's exactly right. People are getting ticked off. This is too freaking much. We lose Iraq, they lose Baghdad, and if that's not a wake-up call, okay, they win with the fluoride in the water, and that's all I'm going to say. And thank you very much, Michael.
Well, I don't know. I mean, some places don't have fluoride, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're starting to put something else in the drinking water to try and keep us calm down here. All right, thanks an awful lot, Mo. We're going to let you go, and we're going to start here with Joanne in Canada. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What is on your mind?
I called the other day about vaccines.
Yes.
Well, according to the Marion Institute in Massachusetts, infants shouldn't be vaccinated before the age of 2 because of the blood-cerebral barrier will still allow foreign proteins to enter the brain.
Now that explains a great deal of the symptoms that we have been seeing from these early vaccinations. Sorry about the noise. I forgot to turn off a button over here. That blood-brain barrier is critical to protect the brain from outside chemicals, and it isn't fully developed until 2 years of age. Okay, Joanne, we got to let you go. I'm sorry. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today, and before we go to the phones here, a listener just sent me an article, a flashback article. We put it up at whatreallyhappened.com. Back in 2002, President Bush was asked, "Where's Osama bin Laden?" And Bush's response was, "I'm not too concerned about that. Who cares?" And, of course, the reporter was a little put back. This is the guy that we're told was responsible for all the deaths of 9/11. How can you not be concerned about it? Well, in hindsight, the answer is simple. In 2002, President Bush knew the real Osama bin Laden, CIA cover name Tim Osman, had been dead for over a year of natural causes. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Anthony in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Anthony, are you there? Anthony?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. There we are.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me now, Michael?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the job you're doing as far as explaining what this banking cabal is all about. I wanted to ask you what you think about this movie or this documentary that's been out there. It's called The Greatest Story Never Told, about Adolf Hitler.
I have not had an opportunity to watch it myself other than take a few peeks at it, but it's another in a long series of documentaries that are pointing out that the official story about World War II, as is the official story of pretty much every other war, is a big, huge concoction of lies, fraud, and deception. And, I would rather that we all stay focused on the provable lies and deceptions of the wars that we're still engaged in, because that has a greater sense of immediacy, and that's what people should be really angry about right now.
But But on the hindsight, but looking back on hindsight on this war with Germany, it's the same people which have their ancestors now governing this banking cabal.
Yeah, it is, and we lay that out in my article. All wars are bankers' wars. These are long family lines, inherited wealth, inherited power, and they're constantly starting wars purely for economic reasons. Even in the 1930s, Winston Churchill was broadcasting on British radio, we're going to force a war on Germany because we can't economically compete with them because we're laboring under a private central bank and Germany is not. He didn't actually say that word for word. I'm paraphrasing loosely, but that was exactly what led to that. Britain and France and all these other countries with private central banks cannot compete with a nation that has a free, honest currency system. And so their solution is not to adopt a free and honest currency system, but to destroy those nations that refuse to be slaves to the private central bankers. That's what all these wars are about.
That's what happened when Churchill declared war on Hitler. According to this documentary, Hitler was trying to negotiate with Poland freedom for these Germans that were trapped there because of the Versailles Treaty. The Versailles Treaty chopped up Germany, and Poland took part of Germany, and there were Germans living there, and they were persecuting Germans, and they were massacring them.
Same thing in the Sudetenland. Same thing was going on in the Sudetenland. And the Treaty of Versailles is also what imposed a private central bank on Germany, which led to the runaway inflation of the Weimar Republic. And, Hitler kicked out the private central bank. He turned Germany's economy around literally overnight. It was called the German miracle in the Western press. But
that's what the documentary talks about,
Okay,
Michael.
well, I'll try and hunt it down over the long weekend and see if I can take a look at it, okay?
Thank you so much, Michael. Have a good weekend and a happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day to you, too. And we're going to switch over here to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Going back to this weekend, it's Memorial Weekend.
Yes.
Memorial Day, all that sort of thing. And just as we're coming up on this Memorial Day, the Pentagon announces it may attack and sink that Iranian humanitarian ship. I mean, how ridiculous can you get? Are they really that determined to start a major war in the Middle East?
I think the Pentagon needs to go back and reread how the public perceived it when the Nazis sunk the Lusitania. Of course, back then we didn't realize it was carrying weapons of war. And I think it could be one of the worst decisions for the U.S. government to do to sink that ship. Now, I expect that the U.S. will confront that ship, and the captain of the ship will back down and reverse course, because I don't think Iran wants to force a confrontation, but it will remind the world that Saudi Arabia and the U.S. are acting like bullies. They have basically declared war on the people of Yemen for daring to kick out their U.S. puppet ruler, and this war with Saudi Arabia as the proxy is all about punishing the people of Yemen for refusing to live under U.S. puppet rule. That's what it's all about. Same thing in Libya, same thing in Iraq.
Well, I want to point out a little history. Those who usually start the war, fire the first shot, tend to lose.
That has always been the case since the dawn of the industrial age, yes.
Yes, and I mean, even, America went into Vietnam, they lost. America went into Iraq, well, they won.
We're not exactly winning there, are we,
Exactly, they won the battles but lost the war. The same in Libya, Syria, it's all the same. So I would caution the Pentagon, because this will turn the world, if they do attack that ship, it will turn the world definitely against America.
I think the world is already pretty much against America, and a big part of the agenda for the current war policy is to literally conquer or covertly subvert all the nations and say, you will come back to be our friends whether you like us or not. And you will, in fact, run your economy for our benefit. You will use our dollar. You will not use the ruble. You will not use the UN. You will not pass go. You will not collect $200.
Well, I think that's gone by the by now. The war with Iraq was to force it back onto using the dollar for its oil. But the wars now, they don't seem to be succeeding. The dollar is being dumped by major nations.
Yeah, the policy's already failed, but nobody in Washington, D.C. is... Well, actually, I take that back. It appears that there are some people inside Washington, D.C., including President Obama, who are recognizing that this policy that came out of PNAC, okay, cannot be completed successfully. And they're risking the nation as a whole trying to perpetuate it. But you have all these fanatics who are convinced America never loses a war, we're great, and they're, you know, in the pay of Israel or various military-industrial complex corporations. They're pushing forward because that's what they are paid to do. And when it all blows up, you know, they'll turn around and say, boy, it didn't work out too well, but hey, I made a huge batch of cash off of this, and so I'm happy.
Well, I think the real problem now facing America is that they never go into a serious war without first establishing air superiority. And unfortunately, the current crop of American aircraft, like the F-35 and the F-22, are just not up to the job.
No, well, the F-35 is not yet in combat service. The F-22 is still asphyxiating its pilots. They're starting to put those things in museums. America is, unfortunately, overly reliant on their drones, their cruise missiles, their smart weapons, and they're actually making the same strategic mistake the Nazis did, an over-reliance on high-tech wonder weapons. And they're sucking resources away from more conventional warfighting capability. The Nazis did exactly the same thing, and they basically lost their country.
Well, I think, but it's not certain yet, but I think the military over in America there are beginning to realize that if they go to war against Russia and China, it may even involve India because they put their troops.
It'll be a mess. John, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're seeing the government and the corporate media breaking into two camps regarding the situation in Iraq. Was it a mistake? Was it not? Now, we have those who are of the opinion that the United States government should never, ever, ever admit error or wrongdoing or mistake. The government has governmental infallibility. No matter how wrong it is, it must be presented as being right. But they're raising on a busted flesh here because the public reasons for the war in Iraq were the possession of banned nuclear weapons of mass destruction, involvement in 9/11, and Iraq's support for al-Qaeda. Those were the public reasons given. We now know Iraq did not, in fact, have banned weapons of mass destruction, nuclear or otherwise, and was not, in fact, in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions passed against them. We have George Bush on video admitting Iraq had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. And the claim that Iraq was supporting al-Qaeda was based on a single discredited source, because Iraq was the only secular government in the region, which made it an ideological enemy of al-Qaeda, which was out there promoting theocratic rule. So they look like evil Muslims and scare us all. So those objectives were never attained, could not be attained. And they're trying to rewrite the history to say, well, the war in Iraq was right because this other thing was happening in this. And we're starting to see who the propagandists are. And a lot of them are just people who, like the government, can't admit they were wrong. They're too much in love with their own self-image here. Case in point, David Brooks, who ever since 2002 was out there cheering on the war agenda. And even today is out there with his Times op-ed page about how, it was the right thing to do. Maybe the reasons are muddled and confused, or maybe we don't even need to know the reasons. We just know it was the right thing to do. And Brooks has, to be objective about it, been constantly wrong about Iraq. And yet he is still on the staff of the Times, writing for the op-ed page. making buku bucks, as it were. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham, who is expected to announce his candidacy for the presidency of the United States of America, is firmly in the camp that Iraq was the right thing to do. Iraq was not a mistake. Bush did everything right. It's Obama who's to blame for the current deterioration because he's not willing to go in and kill enough Iraqi people. So that's Lindsey Graham's take. And Graham is delusional. Of course it was a mistake. Unless there was an agenda behind the Iraq war that Lindsey knows about that we were never told, such as Israel wanted a regional rival smashed. Remember, Israel bombed Iraq's civilian nuclear power station at Osirak. Israel was out there cheerleading for the U.S. to go and kill all those Iraqis. Israel provided much of the since exposed false propaganda, claiming that Iraq had nuclear weapons, they had a Death Star, they were passing wind in elevators, and all the rest of that. And we know that Lindsey Graham is very firmly in the pocket of the Israeli government. He is one of the biggest of the puppets in Washington, D.C., so he's out there saying that. Now, Jeb Bush, of course, is trying to recover from his faux pas of saying, yes, he would invade Iraq, and then he's back saying, well, maybe not. And he's trying to defend George Bush, saying it was faulty intelligence. And it wasn't. And I'm not the only one saying that. There are all these articles popping up saying, of course we know the stories about weapons of mass destruction were a lie. We had the Downing Street memo that said, yes, the U.S. has decided to invade Iraq. We just got to come up with a good excuse the suckers will fall for, meaning you. Remember Tony Blair's dodgy dossier about the immediate threat of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, and it turned out most of it had been stolen, plagiarized from a 12-year-old student thesis paper that was written before Iraq agreed with the United Nations to disarm. It was hopelessly out of date, but it sounded good. Let's put it out there, and those suckers, they'll believe what we tell them because we're the government. Now, Hillary Clinton is having to deal with this issue, and she's out there saying that her vote on the Iraq war, well, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Yeah, in hindsight, it was a mistake, you know. I don't think we need another president who makes such huge mistakes. I mean, all the people who voted for the Iraq war, they're doing a shrug of the shoulders, and they're trying very hard to fake a look of embarrassment and chagrin, but they're not. 4,400 dead Americans, 500,000 dead Iraqis, countless more crippled for life. This is not a trivial mistake. This is not like losing your car keys or misplacing your cell phone. A lot of people died because of this lie. And I do not for 1 second think that Hillary Clinton or any of those others did not know that this was really a war about what Israel wanted in the region, about Iraq selling its oil for the euro, undermining the U.S. petrodollar. They knew. They knew going in. They just thought they had succeeded in bamboozling all of you. And they didn't. They haven't. They won't. Those days when the government can lie to the people with impunity are gone forever. And even if they found some excuse to shut the blogs and the independent media down tomorrow, which they're talking about, the trust of the American people will not be coming back to the government or the corporate media overnight. It will be 50 years of good behavior by the government and the media before the American people trust them again. Another story out of News Forage. The Iraq War wasn't an innocent mistake. America invaded Iraq because the Bush administration wanted the war. The public justifications were all pretext, and we were lied into war. Which, yeah, how do you think countries start wars? Every war in history is started with some kind of a lie or a fraud or a deception. Because the people of a nation don't want to go to war. They have to travel long distances. It's very hard work. It doesn't pay very well. You have to leave your loved ones behind, and there's a risk that you're going to lose important bits of your body. And so every world leader that wants to start an aggression has to play a dirty trick on his own people. Hitler at the Gleiwitz incident, for example, claiming the Lusitania was not carrying weapons. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. On and on and on and on. How much more do you have to be lied to until you accept as a fact that you live under a government that rules you with nothing but lies, fraud, and deception? Another article out of Mondo Weiss saying that the U.S. is now having to face up to the neocon captivity because definitely Israel was cheering this war on. Israel wanted the U.S. to smash their regional rival. They still want the U.S. to smash Iran because of their non-existent nuclear weapons. They can't even come up with a new idea anymore. But remember, wars are not fought for just one reason. People are not assassinated for one reason. There are multiple parties with overlapping agendas that all agree their agenda is served by war or assassination. That's when wars and assassinations happen. And now we have a government admitting Iraq was a mistake, and we need to go back and say, what about all those Americans who died in Iraq? Or were left with lingering Gulf War syndrome, or who permanently crippled, lost pieces of their body? Did they die for nothing? Were they crippled for nothing? Yeah, apparently, because it was all a mistake. There were no weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Iraq was not aiding Al-Qaeda. Yes, all those people died for absolutely nothing but the greed of the money junkies and almighty Israel. We have to take a break for the news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, I want to take a pause here from the news for a couple of comments and observations. We know that thousands of Americans have been killed and crippled in all of these wars on all of these resource-rich nations across the globe. The other side, they don't want you to think about that, but Western wars have killed an estimated 4 million Muslims since 1990. This according to the latest head count, or body count as the case may be. Now, my wife is a big fan of the Doctor Who series, and it led me to sort of look at War Dead from the point of view of a Time Lord. And I did a graphic, which I probably better put back up on whatreallyhappened.com. But think about all those Americans who died in a war that is now generally acknowledged even by the political structure to have been a mistake, even if they're trying to blame it on bad intelligence, as opposed to the outright lies we all know they started the war with. These people aren't just a case of counting them, oh, they're not here anymore, they're not here anymore. You need to ask, what might these 4,000 Americans who died in Iraq gone on to have done with their lives had they been allowed to live, allowed to grow older, unmolested by the government? There might have been one of them in there who found a cheap, clean, renewable energy source. Could have been another one would have invented a whole new technology with which to revitalize our economy. Maybe another one would have been the father of a future president who actually would have found a way to bring world peace. Because it's important to remember, wars don't just murder the present. They murder the future as well. And that is a very terrible price to pay in an argument over what currency Iraq's oil is traded for. Now then, moving on here, let's see, article out of Ex-Republic TV. Ron Paul was right all along about the Iraq War. Yes, he was. So was I, for that matter. So was most of the independent media. We were all right. They were all wrong. But they still get the big bucks. I was rather surprised to find out ABC's contract with George Stephanopoulos, who's already discredited because of his tangles up with the Hillary Foundation, was $105 million. And these people are paid insane amounts of money to basically lie to you. That's what the corporate media does. They find the most convincing liar they can find, and they pay big bucks to get them. So, now then, getting on to Benghazi, we need to pay attention to that, because Judicial Watch's document release basically confirms the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton at the State Department knew there was an attack coming to the consulate in Benghazi 10 days before it happened. And after it happened, of course, they tried to basically cover it up and say, no, it wasn't a terror attack, it was just a riot because of that horrible movie, Innocence of Muslims, which actually turned out to be a 12-minute trailer only. The actual movie never existed. They took some footage from another movie, overdubbed it with new language, threw it together, and put it out there on the web just as quickly as they did those phony pictures of a dead Osama bin Laden after Abbottabad. And here's something to consider. The U.S. government never hesitates to wag any kind of terror attack at us to support the war agenda. The only reason to conceal a terror attack at Benghazi is if it was a false flag terror attack that went horribly, horribly wrong. And I think that's what happened. Obama was trailing Mitt Romney in the polls at the time. And I suspect, Benghazi was supposed to be a small group of terrorists, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, would kidnap the ambassador and hold him for ransom, which would immediately draw the news media's attention away from Mitt Romney and back onto the crisis and how will Obama act. And they'd let the drama build for day after day after day until finally Obama resolves the situation with some kind of a SEAL team raid, proving that he was no Jimmy Carter, and then ride the tide of public approval into his second term. But when the shooting started, the Libyans living in the neighborhoods around the consulate said, hey, they're getting rid of the Americans, and they joined in. It turned into an uncontrolled riot during which the ambassador and 3 others were killed, and they've been trying to cover up for it ever since. I think that's what happened. And yes, we know that the consulate was also at the heart of a Fast and Furious style gun-running operation from Libya into Syria, but I think that's what happened. Now, speaking of Abbottabad and Osama bin Laden, Seymour Hersh's allegations, and by the way, they're supported by other sources, that Pakistan actually had this guy in the house. And Obama sent in the SEAL team to basically grab him to make it look like America had gotten Osama bin Laden. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. And the debate over that is bringing renewed attention to just who that was in the house in Abbottabad, because there's ample documentation that the real Osama bin Laden died in December of 2001 of natural causes relating to his kidney shutdown. And so today, trying to reinforce the official legend that, yes, indeed, it really was bin Laden, the U.S. government is releasing a stack of documents that they claim were found in the house in Abbottabad about Osama's plans for more terror attacks on the United States of America and a mushy love letter to his wife. They're out there trying to protect the most protected part of the entire fraud, that it wasn't Osama bin Laden. They may have thought it was somebody who looked enough like Osama bin Laden that they could use him. Grab him, bring him home, stuff him, put him on display in the Capitol Rotunda, and then the SEALs got in there, looked at the guy and said, nobody's ever going to believe this guy's Osama bin Laden. For one thing, he had porn tapes all over the place. Not a very good, convincing Muslim. So they shot him. They dumped his body in the ocean. And they flooded the Internet with these very badly done fake photos, trying to make it look like, the United States got Osama bin Laden. And it really did not take very long to rip these fakes apart. And now we know that, and again, the Pakistanis had said, no, we got this guy. And Obama said, no, don't listen to them. I'm the hero here, like he did last weekend with this ISIS commander in Syria, where the Syrian government is saying, no, we got this guy. And Obama said, don't listen to Syria. I did it. I'm the hero. I'm exceptional. I'm the great person. All righty, let's see. We're going to grab a phone call here. Steve in Florida. And Steve, we're probably going to have to take you through the commercial break, but what is on your mind?
Oh, no, Mike, this is real quick. I was using Yahoo for homepage, and I can't help but see that some of the headlines there. But the one earlier this week, it said the headline was, after 3 years, Benghazi refuses to die. And I don't even need to tell you why I'm so irate about that, but I looked at the comments and it was just, I swear, these weren't real people making these comments.
Oh no, they've got the online shills are out making triple time right now. I mean, they're out there, not just Benghazi, not just Hillary's campaign, but the war in Iraq. Oh yes, the war in Iraq was right. Don't even think that it could have ever been possibly wrong. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Steve, do you want to stick around?
No, Mike, thanks.
All right, we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just as a thought experiment, let us give Jeb Bush and the other defenders of the war policy the benefit of the doubt and stipulate that, yes, the war in Iraq was the result of badly botched up intelligence. Who is going to be fired? I mean, with a botch up that bad, resulting in 4,000 completely unnecessary American deaths, not to mention all those among the Iraqi people, shouldn't somebody lose their job? Head of the CIA, head of the FBI, head of the NSA, all of those people. In fact, frankly, if I were the president, I'd be firing pretty much the entire management of all those agencies and say, let's start from the ground up with some people who know how to tell the truth. But the reality is, okay, if you go back and you read through the record, all of the U.S. intelligence agencies were actually quite vocal saying, no, there are no nuclear weapons in Iraq. This is a mistake. So while I'm not a huge fan of the spooks, in this case, Jeb Bush is scapegoating them. So is everybody else out there who said, oh, it was faulty intelligence. No, it wasn't. What was coming out of the intelligence agencies was accurate. There were no nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Now, I'm looking here over on Fox News, and they're pushing this whole thing about, what is the strategy dealing with ISIS? And I saw this little video of a guy up on top of a vehicle with the ISIS costume, and he's firing the machine gun into the distance. And the guy with the camera is just circling around him, getting all the angles, which tells me immediately nobody is firing back. It's a staged shot. They really don't know what it takes to make these things look realistic. Bunch of high schoolers over there. All righty, let's see. We're going to grab a phone call here. Scott in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind? Scott, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay. I was just going to touch on the global warming thing and how big of a joke it really is, because here in Texas, it was only like about 2 months ago that the lakes and everything was dry. I mean, like 10 foot down. It was really, but over the last 2 months, the lakes have filled up and they're like overflowing. And so, people say global warming. We're like, man, it is raining so much.
Well, all that snow that they were saying was going to be a thing of the past, it's now melting. And yeah, that water's coming on down there. Now, they've had some flooding in some parts of the country.
This is pure rain. It has been raining nonstop around here.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the weather every day because I'm a contractor. I work outside all the time. And just looking at the weather every day on the IntelliCast, you can see that anywhere from 5 to 8 states a day are still getting snow. Here it's been raining, like almost monsoon type stuff where, I mean, we've had 12 feet of water raise the lakes in 2 months. So, it's good for us because we needed the water badly. It's just, people were saying global warming, and everybody's just laughing about it. It's like, so the more that they try to press this lie upon everybody and everybody's sitting here having to turn their heaters on and stuff up north, they're like, man, this is just total garbage. And
well, I hope they'll keep that attitude because Obama's out there making speeches about, unless you all pay a carbon tax, the national security is threatened by climate change. And by the way, I was going to say this for later in the show, but I might as well go ahead and do this right now. NASA has finally acknowledged that the actual data from satellites that were sent up to observe the Arctic shows that the polar ice caps have not shrunk since 1979. And since the end of 2012, total polar ice extent has remained above the post-1979 average. This is a direct contradiction of Al Gore and the carbon Nazis screaming that the polar caps are shrinking, the polar bears are drowning, and all the rest of that.
Same thing as Brian Williams and Bill O'Reilly, all of them, they're proving that they're liars, and now everybody's seeing it, and the more people that see it, the people that refuse to believe it are having to face up and go, yeah, they did lie.
Yeah, they're starting to peel off on that thing because we're, Memorial Day weekend, they're looking at snow in Colorado, frost warnings all over these various states. Some of these farmers, as if they didn't have enough problems with bird flu and GMO, they're losing some of the crops they put in for a spring planting because they're getting hit with frost again.
Exactly. So that's what I just wanted to press upon y'all. So thanks, keep up the good work, and have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. I know why I'm poor, because I'm always telling the truth. The liars get the big bucks on all of this stuff. I need to start lying so that I can get a big paycheck. In the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth. All right, so you can send in your donations through the PayPal button. Scott, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're going to switch over here to John in Illinois. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I sent you some pictures from the McDonald's rally. Did you get those?
Yes, I did, and I put them up in the Reader's Letters section.
Okay, great, yeah. No, I was back in the area between jobs, and I saw the news helicopters flying around, and I went, oh, the news came to me today, okay. So I went out there. They had police from as 40 and 50 miles away. When I got there, I parked in a corporate parking lot south of the protest, and I came up, and there was, police standing there, and I took some videos and pictures with my phone, and then I saw one of the police cars said Romeoville, and I'm like, that's like 40 miles away.
Oh, they must have been afraid of French fries of mass destruction or something like that. Assault Big Macs.
Yeah, so, and again, corporate, the McDonald's corporate, they told all their employees to work from home, for the next 2 days. And I walked up to one of the police. I said, can I, take pictures for the media? I just wanted a picture of the different squad cars in the McDonald's parking lot. But, no, it was, it was a big crowd, but it was peaceful. Yeah, it was a big crowd. It was peaceful. The police were keeping them on the street. They blocked off a major street. They blocked off 22nd Street, which is huge, gets a lot of traffic. Oak Brook Mall is there. Oak Brook is like the Beverly Hills of Chicago. There's a lot of money there. But, they just went on a big march. Wait a minute. There's actually still some money left in Chicago? I thought they were. I'm kidding. There's a lot of 1%ers here, believe it or not. But it really was. It was honestly, it was a white media watching a bunch of black protesters, but again, you had really old, black guys, 100 feet ahead of the crowd. Well, John, I'm going to have to let you go here. We got to take a break for commercials, but thank you for the photos, and I did use them. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're getting word that the Pentagon is getting ready to send 1,000 anti-tank missiles to Iraq, all of which were paid for by you.
in order that the forces of the U.S. puppet regime will be able to shoot them at tanks being driven by the Iraqi people, which you also paid for. Doesn't really seem like a well-managed war when they take all this money away from you and use it to blow more of it up. They might as well take the money and just throw it in a big giant fire somewhere. Alrighty, article out of RIMF.com, Ukraine, a cancer in Europe's heartland. And they're talking about the fact that Ukraine, since the U.S. coup d'etat in Kiev, has turned into a serious destabilizing influence in the region. The U.S. installed junta basically is following a Nazi-infested fascist manifesto. Tolerates no opposition. No free expression is allowed. Independent journalists risk harassment, assault, imprisonment. Some have even been killed. And these are supposed to be the good guys that we're supporting against the Eastern Ukrainian republics and Crimea, who only want to go their own way and mind their own business. But as the American empire starts to fragment around the edges, the policy is, once we've conquered your country, you stay conquered. And if you even dare think of running your country for yourselves, bad things will happen to you. We'll get Saudi Arabia to come on in there. Now, one of the things Poroshenko did when he assumed power in Kiev that really angered a lot of the Ukrainians, including some of his own supporters, was he brought in all these government ministers from outside the country, including some Americans. Now, Ukraine's economy minister is actually Lithuanian, has no sensitivity to Ukraine whatsoever, and so it hardly comes as a surprise that he is now starting to try and solve Kiev's debt problems for all these war loans by selling off state assets to private interests in the West. In other words, it doesn't really matter who ultimately wins or loses this war. The money junkies will own anything of real value. And it's kind of a weird irony that the people of a nation will be forced to borrow money from the money junkies to fight a war against a foreign conqueror. And then when the war is over, gladly and cheerfully turn their country over to those money junkies because they believe it is somehow just to repay the debt. It really is a scam. And it underscores something I've said many times on this show before. The common enemy of all mankind are private central banks issuing the public currency of a nation as a loan at interest. It does not serve the people. It does not serve the nation. It serves the money junkies. It is a system of enslavement and control. Now, NATO's Stoltenberg has informed Russia's Sergei Lavrov that they must pull out of Ukraine, that Russia must withdraw all troops and heavy weapons from Ukraine and end its support for the separatists or bad things will happen. Nobody's actually provided any proof that Russia has troops or heavy weapons inside Ukraine, or that anything other than humanitarian aid has been sent in to the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. They're still out there trying as hard as they can to convince you that this is all somehow Russia's fault. Another story coming out of reader-supported news, there's been yet another attempt in the media to try and frame Russia for the shoot-down of MH17, Malaysian Airlines. And it's already fallen apart because the photographic images that were put up to say, this is where the Buk missile was and this is how they shot them down, the pictures don't line up. They don't match. Even the author of the piece is saying, we got these off of social media. They're not sourced, they're not validated, there's reasons to doubt their authenticity, but by golly, if it makes Russia look bad, we're going to put it out there in that corporate media here. Meanwhile, the United States has announced they are considering more sanctions against Russia for nuclear violations. This at a time when the world has come to understand that Israel has nuclear weapons, will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, will not allow inspections, but it's another reason to have more sanctions against Russia. Who are those sanctions hurting? They didn't hurt Russia all that much. Russia's economy has rebounded and recovered. Can't say the same thing for the United States. The sanctions against Russia have caused all kinds of financial hardship all across Europe. They've backfired. They didn't work. So, of course, let's do more of the same thing. Because we're the U.S. government. We're never wrong. We never admit a failed policy. We never admit mistake or change course. People might stop trusting us, don't you know? Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister is out there saying that Russia is not going to allow the U.S. to intervene in Russian internal affairs. This is coming from Sergei Lavrov. And this is following Russia's announcement that certain foreign-based non-governmental organizations will be asked to leave the country, such as U.S. aid, which the Russians already caught, providing money to opposition groups to try and destabilize Russia. Now, here in the United States, they're screaming, oh, Russia is stifling freedom of speech. They're shutting down these opposition groups here. No, what Russia is doing is they want to avoid what happened in Kiev, what happened in Tehran in 1953, what happened in Chile in 1973. The world understands this is how the U.S. maintains its empire. Go into a country, kick up a ruckus, drive the legitimate elected government from power, install a puppet, and make huge amounts of money off of the country. And Russia does not want to be destabilized from inside. And they have every right to say, no, you cannot come into my country and muck things up. And by the way, this is the reason the world hates the United States of America. They don't hate us for our freedoms. They don't hate us because we've got Disneyland. They don't hate us because we've got Hollywood. The rest of the world hates the government of the United States of America because it continually goes into other people's countries to disrupt their society and replace it with a puppet of their own. And by the way, Israel's done the same thing to the United States of America and Canada. So there's a hierarchy involved in all of this. Now, as one of the callers earlier in the show mentioned, the U.S. is threatening the military option against this latest Iran ship carrying humanitarian aid to the people of Yemen. The Saudi warplanes have not been targeting military targets alone. They have blown up warehouses full of food, destroyed water supplies. This is not a war against some kind of a military enemy. It is punishment inflicted on the people of Yemen as a whole for daring to kick out their U.S. puppet ruler. And obviously, it's counterproductive to allow anybody to go in there with food, water, and medical supplies to ease the punishment. And that's why the U.S. is threatening to open fire on this humanitarian aid ship, which puts the U.S. on the exact same moral level as Israel when Israel attacked a humanitarian aid convoy in international waters on its way to Gaza and murdered 8 people, one of them an American citizen. Now, I don't think there'll be a confrontation. I don't think Iran has ordered the captain of the ship to bring about a confrontation. I think the ship will turn around, but the world will see once again how the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are brutalizing and starving, collectively, the people of Yemen. That is a war crime. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there's a very bizarre article. This is over in Haaretz. And the headline reads, Washington, Jerusalem discussing massive compensation for Iranian nuclear deal. And basically what it is Israel is now saying, we'll let you make a deal for a fee. And it's going to be a huge new package of weaponry that you will all pay for, including reportedly the F-35. Can't imagine why Israel would want that, other than to reverse engineer it and start selling its technology to our enemies, which they have been caught doing in the past. But do you realize that this underscores the fact the U.S. government in Washington, D.C. is a puppet regime for Israel? because the U.S. and Iran are working on a peace deal, but the U.S. government has to buy Israel's permission to move forward. Israel, of course, being a nuclear power, being outside the rules, will not sign the NNPT, will not allow inspections, is not part of the P5+1. But they are in control, and if the U.S. government wants peace, well, there has to be a tribute paid to Tel Aviv, to the seat of the empire. Now, yesterday there was a story that came out where Israel was going to start having segregated buses over in the West Bank. There'd be a bus for the Jewish people and a bus for the non-Jewish people. And the outrage around the globe just exploded. Images of 1950s Deep South here in America. And hammered home the image of Israel's government being a racist apartheid government. And Israel was forced to back off and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do separation would be unthinkable. That's a direct quote here. But obviously somebody somewhere thought it was thinkable. And they actually thought that they were going to be able to do it and not get a huge backlash in world opinion. I think Israel's government doesn't fully comprehend just how badly their image around the world has declined. And unfortunately, they're dragging the U.S. government's reputation down into the gutter with them. Now, remember during the recent election in Britain, where David Cameron and the Tories scored that surprise, unexpected, never revealed by the polls victory, accompanied by the usual massive allegations of election fraud. Cameron campaigned by pitting Britain and Scotland against each other in his speeches. Now, Scotland's National Party took pretty much all of Scotland's seats in Parliament. And David Cameron immediately said, well, that doesn't mean there won't be a new referendum because we already stole that last referendum fair and square, and that settles the matter. Scotland will always be part of the United Kingdom. And the Scottish National Party is basically coming out and saying, actually, no. Not after the way you were bashing us during your campaign speeches, not after the way you were trying to pit us against the British people, that there will, in fact, be a new independence referendum, and this time they're going to be keeping a really close eye on who's counting those ballots. We're actually seeing sections of North England signing petitions they want to join with Scotland. They've had it with the royal family. They've had it with Cameron and the Tories and austerity. Now, turning to the global economy, I'm seeing this story over an Investment Watch blog where apparently Greece is now indicating that they will be unable to meet their obligations. They will be in a state of default as of June 5th. And that's when things are really going to start breaking apart all across Europe. And, of course, it will come here to the United States of America, courtesy of those credit default swaps sold by Wall Street. It's another reason for the federal government to be trying to figure out some way that they can get rid of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in the next few days. And obviously, with a government that has played all these false flag attacks on us before, we should be concerned about Memorial Day. And there's more reasons for that I'm going to get to a little bit later down. Barclays was hit with a £1.5 billion fine for rigging foreign exchange rates. Global Bank's total exposure to the fines from that scandal, £3.6 billion. The Swiss bank UBS has settled their U.S. legal cases for the paltry sum of $545 million. Not one single banker has gone to jail. Who pays for these crimes? Well, the victims of those crimes paid. And the investors in the banks will pay, and the customers will pay. But not the people who actually committed the crime. They got off scot-free. And that's led to an article over in ITV.com saying big fines may not be enough to deter bad behavior in banks. No, it isn't. It hasn't. It never has. They'll take those fines and deduct them from their taxes and drop the rest of the losses on their customers and everybody else and keep right on going. It's a cost of doing business. We need to do what Iceland did. We need to start taking bankers who are caught committing these white-collar crimes and throw them in prison. Not a country club, political appointee prison, but I'm talking about hard time. Throw these guys in a cell with a big burly man who's going to glare at them and say, "You know, you my baby now." Now, interestingly enough, sources at Iran's Presidential Center for Legal Affairs has announced that Israel has been ordered to pay Iran $1.1 billion. Now, the ruling relates to the fact that Israel was acquiring Iranian oil prior to 1979 and selling it, and they were supposed to pay Iran back that money. Following the 1979 revolution, Israel said, we don't need to pay them. And now it's caught up with them. And guess who Israel's going to get that money from to pay that fine? They're not going to take it out of their own pocket. I mean, that's ridiculous here. Let's see. Howard Davidowitz, retail closings, bankruptcies, average USA shopper broke. Another story we're looking at out of Investment Watch blog, the gathering bond storm in Chicago. Chicago is not close to bankrupt. It is already completely bankrupt. Nobody wants to admit it. We're seeing that all over the country. 32 states right now are at the edge of fiscal crises. We were talking yesterday about how up in Alaska they're already sending out layoff notices to state workers that as of July 1 they're probably going to be without a job. Now here's a very alarming set of stories. Actually, it's one story here. And it originally came out of activistpost.com. And it starts with the question, is martial law justified if ISIS attacks the United States? The U.S. has been trying to get race riots going. That hasn't worked out. Well, they've got that ready-made villain. ISIS is coming to attack the United States, and if they do, martial law will be justified. And we have all of these dark hints coming out of the FBI and the TSA that, yes, ISIS is going to attack the United States, and when they do, we'll have to bring about a national emergency and martial law. They are really getting desperate. They know they have lost the trust of the American people. They know that they can no longer lie to us with impunity to trick us out of our money, our obedience, and the lives of our children for more wars of conquest. They're at desperation on the cusp of madness. Unfortunately, desperate people do desperate things, occasionally stupid things. But it's a very dangerous, dynamic time. I hope cooler heads will prevail, but it is a certainty. There are some people inside Washington, D.C. saying, we got to nuke an American city and say it was ISIS in Iran. We got to have martial law. We got to shut down the blogs. You know, we can't run this country if we have to tell the truth. We'll be back after the news. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. I'm looking at this story over an Investment Watch blog. Apparently, if you use PayPal, you've probably noticed they've got this pay later button where the usual payment button would be. And it's basically, it's a push to get you on the credit debt treadmill. And apparently they've just been fined $25 million for engaging in fraud. Apparently signing people up for the service without their permission. It's a tacky no-no. Alrighty, getting on back to the news here. The other day we were talking about how leaked documents showed that George Soros had funded this organization in Ferguson that was paying people to cause civil unrest. And then the irony is that not everybody got the money they were promised, and they're now protesting the organization. Well, there's another story from Wake Up From Your Slumber where another leaked memo has come out showing that non-governmental organizations funded by George Soros were paying Macedonian students $1,500 each to come up with ideas on how to bring about regime change. Think about that one for a while. Now, getting on over to Hillary Clinton. One of her campaign officials was out there saying, but every day it's more bad news. And yes, it is. Because now it looks like Hillary Clinton is facing 2 perjury charges over her testimony before Congress regarding her email server. Because she claimed she only had the one email address, and that the second one, which has now been linked to George Stephanopoulos, didn't exist at the time. Emails have come out basically proving both those were false. Now, will Congress prosecute her for perjury? No, of course they won't. But politics is perception, and bit by bit, the people of the United States of America are being reminded that Hillary, like everybody else in politics, is a serial liar. She's out there pushing populism, and I'm just like you, while she's just raking in millions of dollars from all these big corporate donors, including the GMO corporations. She's a big defender of GMO, and you don't need labels. This stuff couldn't possibly hurt you. Another story coming out of Oraz.com talking about evidence of the CIA's torture operation. And remember, I said the reason they are not releasing the people from Guantanamo, even though that military tribunal says they're innocent of wrongdoing, is that worse things have been done to them than the waterboarding. And so this story over at Oraz is basically saying the CIA has destroyed a huge amount of evidence, including the tapes of the interrogations. And there's a direct quote in there from one of the torturer's apprentices. I was told if these videotapes had ever been seen, the reaction around the world would not have been survivable. Now remember, there was one of the victims of the U.S. torture agenda, Binyam Mohammed, who managed to be released. And they thought he would go away and not be heard from him again, but he went public and was willing to show the scars on his body, what was done to him, which included slicing very delicate parts of his anatomy with razor blades. The waterboarding is not the worst of it. The waterboarding is torture. Don't let them tell you otherwise. It's been a form of torture going all the way back to the Unholy Inquisition. It was used in Vietnam. The Japanese military officers in World War II who waterboarded captured American flyers were hanged as war criminals for doing that. So if it's torture when the Japanese officers are doing it, it's torture when the American officers are doing that. It's basically what it comes on down to. Now here's an interesting little story from Business Insider. They found confirmation that, in point of fact, the United States Drug Enforcement Agency did have a deal with Mexico's Sinaloa cartel that allowed the cartel to smuggle billions of dollars of drugs into the United States of America, and the U.S. helped the Sinaloa cartel get rid of its competition by arming them through that Fast and Furious program. The U.S. government has a long tradition of clandestine drug smuggling. They were bringing heroin back from Vietnam inside the body bags of our dead soldiers. Iran-Contra. The covert war in Nicaragua was being funded with cocaine money. That was all going through Arkansas while Bill Clinton was governor of that state. We have drug lords in the government of the United States of America. In fact, at this point, it's safe to say the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. Now remember, Gary Webb, he wrote a book exposing the CIA links to cocaine smuggling and the crack epidemic in Los Angeles. And then poor Gary got really, really, really depressed and committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. Twice. We're going to take a phone call here. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Actually, I called about something else, but I wanted to say, relative to what we were just talking about with the lies in the Clinton administration, I'm kind of wondering why George Snuffleupagus doesn't just bail while he has a shred of dignity left.
Oh, because he's got that $100 million contract with ABC. He's not going to walk away from that money.
Yeah, I guess that's what's holding him in there. But, I mean, he's going to go, down with the Clintons if he continues to be faithful. But anyway, I kind of like the name Snuffleupagus.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. What I called about really was you referenced a story earlier about Russia being accused of nuclear infractions. While we're on the topic of nuclear infractions, why don't we look at American-based GE, which is the puppet master for Japan's TEPCO, which has actually wrought nuclear havoc on the entire world at this point. How about that for a nuclear infraction?
Oh, absolutely. I've looked at the design of that GE reactor, and I already have one serious concern with it. Most nuclear reactors, going all the way back to the very first one at the University of Chicago, the control rods are lowered in from the top so that in the event the control mechanism fails, you can just cut that line and gravity will slam the control rods down and shut the reactor down. When they were doing it in Chicago, they had a student whose only job was to stand there, and the rope for the control rods went over a wood block, and he was holding an axe. And his entire job was, if any alarms went off, he cut that rope. And he was called the Safety Control Reactor Axe Man, which is where the acronym SCRAM comes from. That's where it comes from. But in the GE design, the control rods are underneath the core, and they're driven up on motors. And so if those motors fail, there's not a backup system. You can't cut a line and let gravity come to your...
It's pathetically stupid not to enlist the aid of gravity for that task.
It really is, and I'm sure they did it to evade somebody's patent or to come up with their own patent and profit thereby. But there are some deficiencies with the design. There were former GE engineers who went public and said, there are problems with this reactor. And GE designed all the reactors at Fukushima. They built 3 of them, I think. TEPCO built the others. There's a problem with that reactor design. Now, GE could get off the hook by getting into those non-volatile memories on those Siemens controllers and finding Stuxnet is in there. But nobody even wants to talk about that, because with Stuxnet traced back to the U.S. and Israel, that means that the U.S. and Israel, in their haste to get Iran, turned a calamity in Japan into an outright disaster. We got to take a break. Okay, stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after the commercial.
Thank you.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phone here. Glenn in Pennsylvania, you had one more thing you wanted to say.
Yeah, even if Stuxnet had affected the Siemens control system, if the generators had been put in a more strategically proper location, if the seawall designs had not been subverted and skimped on, if the ventilation system had been properly furbished the way it was supposed to, all those things sort of helped to mitigate it, even if Stuxnet had hit it.
Well, you're absolutely right there. I mean, we're looking at a cascade of problems here that were all brought about because the money junkies wanted to save a few bucks here and there. And there is an object lesson out of that quake and tsunami, because just down the coast from Fukushima, Daiichi, there was another nuclear power station at Onagawa. And it was legendary because the engineer who was in charge of building that facility absolutely would not allow any reduction in any of the safety requirements. And literally, risked his career and everything, and that Onagawa power plant was the only one that didn't suffer any damage from the quake and the tsunami. And it tells us it is, in fact, possible to have these technologies, nuclear power, deep ocean floor drilling, as long as you don't let the money junkies make the safety decisions. Now, in theory, government is supposed to... In theory, government... Yeah. In theory, government is supposed to perform that function, but certainly here in the United States of America, all of these agencies that are supposed to be keeping an eye on the corporations don't do that. In fact, they see themselves as support for the corporations, whether it's the Minerals Management Service at the Deepwater Horizon, the Bureau of Mine Safety, the Food and Drug Administration, the USDA. They all see themselves as part of the marketing arm to convince the people that these are safe products and just go ahead and use them and nothing bad will happen to you.
Well, there's fundamental disconnection from the real world. What if we had a man like him in place in the Deepwater Horizon who refused to push the button? He'd be a hero now, instead of the president being given money and sent halfway around the world. And then the Gulf oil disaster just happening.
Yeah, and they're already starting to drill in that same exact area again, and they're still not using automated blowout preventers.
There's a fundamental disconnect. I really wonder about the technology, with the toys and devices having reset buttons. If there's a fundamental disconnect between people understanding that, like you talk about the epicyte gene. These people don't seem to understand that in the real physical world there is no reset button.
Well, they don't really care. They're all about the, get the sale out there, make the stockholders happy, get the next quarterly report looking good. I want my bonus check. I want to retire at age 30. And when it all blows up, it's somebody else's problem. We'll hire Ann Coulter to tell everybody a little radiation's actually good for you.
Apparently they don't care about their posterity.
No, they don't care because they'll go to their graves happy after a lifetime of wealth and luxury and privilege, and they don't care what comes on after them. They never have. Glenn, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. I got a lot of stuff to cover before the end of the show today, and I want to hit this right now. Senator Rand Paul and Senator Ron Wyden have launched a filibuster on the floor of the United States Senate against renewal of the USA Patriot Act, which is due to sunset end of this month. Many of the provisions are due to sunset. Not all of them, but certainly the most onerous ones about spying on law-abiding American citizens. And they've got this filibuster. C-SPAN is covering it. And they're going to try and basically run out the clock to the end of the month. On the other side, of course, you have the White House, which is ramping up pressure for renewal of all this spying on all of us. And I saw this rather interesting article over here in RINF.com, where the National Security Agency, fearing that the Patriot Act will end and the Freedom Act will not be passed, will start winding down bulk surveillance operations this weekend. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Because the NSA was spying on you when it was illegal and unconstitutional. They're going to go on spying on you when it's illegal again. Because that's just what they do. And you need to be taking care of the security of your business secrets yourself. The government is not going to protect you. The government's gone over to the other side. Down in Australia, they just passed a law where, as of the 1st of next year, teaching encryption will be a crime. So if you're listening to the show from Australia, download my NSA Challenge code examples now before the end of the year. Because if you download them after that, you're committing a crime against the country. By the way, for those of you who are movie fans, remember Zero Dark 30? Amazing piece of pro-government, pro-war propaganda. Apparently the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency helped them make that movie. Now, here's a very interesting story out of Electronic Intifada. False claims of anti-Semitism climb on U.S. campuses. New report. We know that right now Israel is out there pushing for censorship on college campuses, censorship on the Internet, censorship everywhere because of the rise in anti-Semitism. See, it's horrible. They hate us all. We have a right to control other people's speech because they're saying bad things about us. Well, it turns out, according to Palestine Solidarity Legal Support Organization, published a report saying that 84 of these incidences of anti-Semitism that were reported across the United States turned out to simply be people who were criticizing Israel. They're really trying to push this idea that criticism of Israel's government represents hatred of the Jewish people, which is like trying to convince us that criticism of Hitler represents hatred of the German people. And it's nonsense, but it's amazing how far they've gotten along with this thing. All righty. Getting onto the computers, there's a new bug out there, new malware called the Logjam Crypto Bug. And it's now thought that this is another product of the NSA, the sweetest-smelling spies in the world. And it's what they use to crack virtual private networks, to get inside and peek at what you are doing, to steal naked pictures of your lovers, steal your business secrets so they can make a little extra money on the side, find something that they can blackmail you with, because they have been caught doing all of that time and time and time and time again. Now, for those of you who are drivers, you've probably seen these commercials on TV for Progressive Insurance about this little tiny gizmo called Snapshot, where you will take it, and if you have a newer car, there's a data port at the bottom of your steering wheel, and you supposedly put this Snapshot into that, drive for a month, and then they will calculate what your car insurance premiums are going to be. Sounds like a really good idea. Turns out this little Snapshot gizmo is defective. It causes problems on the cars. In some cases, permanent damage. In some cases, shutting off the engine right in the middle of traffic. Progressive says there isn't a problem, but in a lawsuit they've admitted there have been 8,000 complaints, and Progressive has had to pay out $500,000 reimbursement for repairs to the cars. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm watching a rather interesting exercise here on Fox News. Now, yesterday, we pointed out how Secretary of State John Kerry, even as he seems to be backing away from Ukraine and talking about let's give Minsk a chance to work, turned around and said we must engage North Korea. And not surprisingly, we're seeing a lot of coverage today about the threat that North Korea poses to the United States of America. And there's a story that has come out where North Korea has succeeded in miniaturizing a nuclear warhead to the point where they can put it on their existing missiles and hit the American homeland. But what's really interesting is you've got a lot of he said, she said going on here, because you've got one group saying, yes, they've done it. You've got these other groups saying, no, they haven't. Somebody in the Pentagon a month ago was saying, yes, North Korea is working on miniaturizing the nuclear warhead. There was the photo supposedly showing the successful test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Some people are saying, see, it proves North Korea is coming along. And oh, no, it's a forgery, it's a fake, it's Photoshop. I am sensing the U.S. government is starting to split between those who just want to keep wars going and we don't care who we're attacking, and the saner faction, which is realizing that the U.S. lacks the money, the manufacturing, and the manpower to carry this agenda through to completion. Got half the government wants to kick off World War III for real, and they don't care what happens. And the other half saying, we're going to lose this one, and it's going to go nuclear. And I don't think we ought to be going down this path any longer. So let's hear it for the saner minds over there. Speaking of manufacturing and getting back to this Snapshot fiasco for Progressive, where the official policy is, no, this has never interfered with a car, and yet they're paying out damages on it. And coupled with that other story about the enlargement of the recall for the airbags. Now, I'm sorry, airbags are very simple devices. This Snapshot is a very simple gizmo. And still they've got problems. And we seem to have reached a point where we've lost our ability to manufacture reliable quality products because we have for too long gotten by simply covering it all up. Defective products, defective vaccines, defective Tylenol, tampered Tylenol. And just let the public relations firms try and cover it up. Now, my father spent his entire life in manufacturing, designing factories, laying them out, how to have a quality manufacturing environment to manufacture quality products. He would be appalled to see the decline in manufacturing in this country. And he was very good at what he did. He graduated MIT. But we've lost our ability to make quality products. We've lost our desire to make quality products. We make products to lure people onto the credit cards, and after that, who cares if they work or not? Anyway. Now, I may have spoken too soon about Rand Paul, because I'm looking at this article from the Christian Science Monitor, was just sent in by a listener, saying the filibuster that wasn't, because Rand Paul is talking at a time when the Senate is not able to do any business anyway, because of a technicality. A real filibuster halts the Senate business, but the Senate is already halted because they're waiting for the clock to run out on a procedural vote on trade. It won't become a real filibuster until 12:01 tomorrow morning. So Rand Paul is basically taking a dead space on the Senate to get up there and act like he's filibustering against the Patriot Act. We need to keep an eye on these people. They are such fraudsters. Rand Paul is not his son. And I know Ron Paul loves his son and backs him, but they are two very, very different individuals. I think Rand Paul has daddy issues. He's got this deep need to outdo his father, and he's not troubled by any compromises, moral or financial, that he has to make to do that. He wants to go further than his daddy did. Very interesting story out of Russia today. The Canadian Navy has had to resort to eBay to find parts for their supply ships. The supply ships are outdated. New spare parts are not available. They're basically going out on eBay looking for parts that they can buy to keep their ships running until the replacement ships are ready to go, which is still a ways off. And not a lot of people know this. NASA was actually doing the same thing in the final days of the space shuttle program, because the space shuttles had been built with robust, reliable technology. It wasn't cutting edge. And by the end of the space shuttle mission, it was hard to find some of those original components. And NASA was resorting to trying to track down bits and pieces on eBay. eBay is a wonderful resource for that sort of thing, by the way. 27 tornadoes reported in the last 24 hours. Boy, I mean, take a look at the United States. We're getting earthquakes where we never got them before, tornadoes all over the place, freezing weather lingering in. And, you know, for those people who buy into this idea that there is an imaginary playmate in the sky, it sure does look like he, she, or they are seriously angry with the United States of America right now. Because, after all, we've been bombing all those people over in the Middle East who are distant blood relations of Jesus. So, anyway. Let's see. This is a big story, and the corporate media is covering it, and I'm glad they're covering it. This is important. It has to do with these private cancer charities. And the four big ones, there were a whole bunch of them, but the four big ones, Cancer Fund of America, Cancer Support Services, Children's Cancer Fund of America, and the Breast Cancer Society. Now, these were not set up as non-profit organizations. They were incorporated as for-profit ventures. They took in, over the years, $187 million, of which only 3% actually went to any cancer patients and their treatment. And the rest they just put in their pockets. They bought cars, gym memberships, luxury cruise vacations, college tuition, hired all their family members for six-figure salaries. And it's all owned by one family. Just one family. You've got to be careful when you see an ad for a charity. And it's not enough to just sit there and write a check and send it off and say, oh, good, I saved the tigers or something. If you really want to help right now, get out there, get involved in your community. Go out and actually go to the food distribution program. Take food with you. Go out to the bulk store, buy what you can, take it on down there, because that way you know 100% of the money goes to the people who really need it. It's not being taken up by advertising budgets, administrative fees, or just being outright scammed. Because we know this government looks the other way for all kinds of other corporate scams. We have absolutely no guarantee that any of these charities that advertise on TV are what they're supposed to be. Charity begins at home and in your own neighborhood. Go out and find a food program or a homeless shelter program or something to help the kids and get involved. Look into their eyes for yourself. It'll be your Buddha on the road moment. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here. And following on that story about these private cancer charities basically being a fraud. $180 million they took in donations. Only 3% actually went to cancer patients. The rest just went in their pocket. And by the way, they got away with this for a lot of years. Now, Linus Pauling is a 2-time Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. He's considered a very important scientist. I'm sure you've heard the name. He's one of the founders of quantum chemistry and molecular biology. He's also a peace activist, and he's basically come out saying everyone should know that most cancer research is largely a fraud, and that the major cancer research organizations are derelict in their duties to the people who support them. Any of these organizations that says they're looking for a cure, they are lying. Nobody in the medical industrial complex wants a cure for anything. They want treatments. They want very expensive drugs that'll make these symptoms survivable, but they do not want you cured because then you go away and they get no more money from you. Everyone's always talking about, why can't they cure the common cold? Well, because the cold is a big money maker. If I invented a pill that cured the cold, it's the end of an empire. What they want are medicines that make you feel okay, so you go to work with your cold, and you give it to your coworkers who come down with it. They go buy the medicine that makes them feel okay as they go about shopping and visiting family and friends and spread the cold even more. It maximizes the profitability. A cold cure, you sell to the first person who's got the cold, patient 0. A cold treatment, you sell to pretty much the entire population. That's the math behind it. If you have a cure for cancer, it's a one-shot deal. Treatment for cancer for the rest of the patient's life. Same thing with AIDS. Nobody was ever looking for a cure for AIDS. They're looking for AIDS treatment because it's driven not by health, not by the welfare of the patient. It's driven by profitability. Now, earlier in the week, you were hearing this story about this horrible incident took place at a biker bar down in Waco, Texas, and they were out there screaming, this is why we've got to ban guns, and we've got to have a 15-day waiting period on Harley-Davidsons. And all of a sudden, the story kind of faded off the corporate media, and everybody's scratching their head saying, what the heck's going on here? Now, the original story from the police was the fight began in a restroom of this bar. Everybody who was killed died inside the bar, then the argument spilled outside. And the police stepped in, calmed everything down, arrested the people, took them away. Well, apparently somebody leaked the internal documents about what happened. The fight started in the outdoor parking lot between these two biker gangs. And yes, they did have guns and shots were fired. Nobody was hit. The witnesses are saying that all 9 of the people killed in this incident were killed by the police shooting into the crowd. This is a repeat of that horrible disaster over at the Empire State Building when the police confronted a criminal in the street. There was a wild shootout. Everybody who was shot by the NYPD. And that's why the story's fading away here. Now, another story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently Google has taken it upon themselves to try and harass anybody putting up videos critical of Hillary Clinton's run for the White House. And it has to do with this one group that is making these videos about Hillary. And in order to fund their operation, they monetize the videos, which means there are ads seen on the videos that YouTube shows, and YouTube will then send money to the author of the video. And Google has been canceling the monetization on the videos to dry up their money. By the way, Google will not allow me to monetize my videos on YouTube. Absolutely forbidden. You're not allowed. You can't have an AdSense account. We don't like you. Not quite the warm, fuzzy image of Google we got from the internship movie, which is a fun movie anyway, you know, even though it's a fantasy like so much else here. All righty, let's see. Here's a very interesting story out of Government Slaves. Over in Los Angeles County, the Child Protective Services, a few years ago, took 2 children out of their home, away from the parents. The sole justification for taking these kids from their parents was the children were not vaccinated. The parents were opposed to vaccination. They promptly sued, as they should have, because the county did not actually have a legitimate reason to remove the child from the home. Non-vaccination is not listed as a valid cause. And the city of Los Angeles is paying the family $800,000 to settle the civil rights lawsuit. And the parents were right to be cautious. Remember that vaccine scandal down in that Mexican town? 75% of the kids who got the vaccines are either dead or in the hospital. If vaccines really were safe, if they were effective, there wouldn't be a big stink about it. But whether it's vaccines or GMOs, the fact that they're having to try and force it on us is because we know there are questions of safety and health. And they know, we know. They don't want to spend the money to fix the problems, to actually come up with a good product. It's just cheaper to bribe congressmen and hire public relations firms to get you to buy a bad product. There's a wonderful movie called The Constant Gardener, Ralph Fiennes and Rachel Weisz. And it's a very well done movie. And I saw it on the cable lineup the other day, so it's making the rounds once again, as some of the endless reruns we're constantly seeing. And if you get a chance, you should see it. It is actually based on a true story about pharmaceutical corporation corruption. There's one line in there where this doctor says, the big pharmaceutical companies are right up there with the weapons developers. He's absolutely right. 2 million more Minnesota chickens have to be destroyed due to the bird flu. They're already saying that the supply of eggs has already been cut 10% in this country. Those prices are going to be going up as well. They're talking about a turkey-free Thanksgiving this year. And we still need to look into this issue about all these livestock farmers who are going out of business because they start feeding their livestock GMO corn and the livestock stops reproducing. And maybe this is Monsanto's plan. You will have to buy your Roundup-ready piglets every year from us. You're not allowed to just breed your pigs. You're not allowed to plant heritage seeds. Oh, no. You will come to us and buy the source materials for next year's food crops. Now, Cuba's back in the news, and by the way, I'm still looking to find someplace that sells Cuban cigars, just for the statement. Cuba is now offering free medical school to black and Latino Americans. We all know the high cost of education, how students are graduating, crippled by student loan debt. We know Cuba has an amazing medical system, better than we have here in the United States of America. And Cuba is now saying black and Latino Americans can go to Cuba and get a medical education for free. By the way, Cuba has a promising therapeutic vaccine against lung cancer. They've had it for years. Can't get it in the United States of America because of the embargo. So Americans are being condemned to death by lung cancer by the U.S. government just so that they can go on thumbing their nose at Cuba. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Call to Rivero's Rangers, please. contact your local talk radio station. Ask them to carry the GCN programming. Send them over to the website, gcnlive.com. For my show, it's wrhradio.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.